Well, we have to start at the beginning, don't we, James? Really, to even get a grasp on this story. So, you start where you think is most appropriate, and then take us on the journey to where we are now. And myself and Tim will probably just sit back and listen for 15 minutes.
It's complicated, and look, we have to go back maybe a couple of years because a regulator in Italy wanted to flag some transfers that had caught its attention to the prosecutor of the Italian Football Federation. It involved 9 clubs and more than 50 executives. And I think what was kind of quite interesting about this document, that maybe 2/3 of the transfers on it, there were around 60, were involving Juventus. And a large number of them were swap deals, where, they're called kind of mirror operations, in that what you do is you decide, you like this player, I like that player. Let's do a player exchange. Let's decide on the valuation of the player, and let's go from there. And it goes beyond getting a good player. If that's the intention, you also get a financial benefit because you're able to book this player as an asset on your accounts. It might be that player is worth a lot of money. That's good. And the problem really in this case, or at least from the Italian Football Federation's perspective, their prosecutor, was that there is no metric in world football for valuing players. And so when this case actually went to a sporting trial in April of last year, the Italian Football Federation lost it because they, in their argument, used Transfermarkt, the website that I think we're all kind of familiar with, which kind of, it has news on it, but also has player evaluations and contract information. But it's not industry standard. It's not endorsed by football federations. And so what happened was all the clubs were cleared, and the prosecutor for the Italian Football Federation appealed that decision. He lost that appeal. And so it looked like this was done, that Juventus and the other clubs were in the clear. And then what happened is you have a separate investigation headed up by public prosecutors in Turin. And they are looking into Juventus's financial affairs for 3 accounting years. And at the culmination in that investigation, when the investigators pass on the evidence that they've gathered, the prosecutor for the Italian Football Federation says, "Oh, could I have a look at the evidence that you've gathered?" And he essentially went to the Court of Appeal on Friday and said, "Look, new information has come to light, and I believe that the appeal that was rejected should be revoked, and I recommend that there is a 9-point penalty imposed on Juventus." And this all happened in one dramatic day. And so around 9 o'clock at night on Friday, the Court of Appeal had listened to Juventus's defense. They believed that this motion filed by the Italian Football Federation prosecutor was inadmissible. And they decided to go with what the prosecutor for the Italian Football Federation said, reopen the case and go straight to sentencing. And they didn't just adhere to his recommendation for a 9-point penalty. The real surprise was that they came down even harder on Juventus and gave them a 15-point penalty. And so Juventus's legal team believe that this is a clear injustice. It's been interesting seeing some of the coverage in the newspapers in Italy. Tutto Sport, which is the sports daily based in Turin, you'll probably get 5, 6, 7, 8 pages about Juventus every day in there. It said injustice is done on their front page. And a lot of the debate for the last few days has been, how is it that only Juventus have been done for this, when the initial investigation was into 9 clubs and, as I said, more than 50 executives. And
those 9 clubs, James, were all Italian clubs, I'm guessing.
All Italian clubs.
Yeah.
And we're still awaiting the written reasons from the Court of Appeal as to why they took this decision. But the speculation is that because this new evidence that was presented by the Italian Football Federation's prosecutor was from a separate criminal investigation into Juventus's financial affairs, it only involves Juventus. So that's where we are at the moment with this 15-point penalty that Juventus have got. What they can do is they're going to wait for the written reasons, which will be published in 10 days' time from the Court of Appeal. And they've already announced their intention to appeal this decision. So once those written reasons are published, they've got 30 days to let their legal team have a look at them. And then they will go to the Board of Guarantors, which is another appeal process, this time headed by the Italian Olympic Committee, which is the supreme sporting body in Italy. And that body, what it can do is it can't reduce the 15-point penalty, say like to 9 or to 5 or to 2. It can only rule on whether the Italian Football Federation's prosecutor in the Court of Appeal followed protocol exactly to the line, that procedurally this sentencing was done in the absolute correct manner. So you've got 2 scenarios, really. Either the points penalty is annulled and Juventus go back to where they were in the table, or it's upheld and they have to accept it and live with it.
As you mentioned right at the start, transfer fees are not an exact science. I mean, my God, numbers just seem to be plucked out of nowhere sometimes in trying to value players. So that's one side that we can have a discussion on, really. But and that might be the headline story, oh, they've inflated transfer fees. Although I still don't, all clubs inflate transfer fees, it would seem to me. But anyhow, is this a wider financial issue, actually, when we get right to the crux of it?
It is. So it's looking at a kind of 3-year period. And, we've mentioned the transfer aspect, which focuses on these swap deals. But the other aspect is what is called salary maneuvers, and salary maneuvers is the decisions that they came to during COVID to defer wages, and how that was then communicated in their public financial statements, and whether that information was accurate or not. And Juventus, kind of in this time, were going also through or preparing for a capital increase. So they were essentially going to shareholders and saying, we need to raise some capital here. And they've done it twice, really, over, trying to think of the last time frame, the last 5 years, where they've essentially raised about 700, 800 million. So obviously, all of that is sensitive to the information that you publicly disclose about your finances. So that's why this is really important. So it's the interesting thing, Chappers, is in the sporting sense. So this is where it deals with points penalties. We've had this one case which has led to a 15-point penalty, which may or may not yet be overturned, or it may be upheld. We'll have to see. And that purely focused on the transfer side. The federal prosecutor of the Italian Football Federation is also looking at salary maneuvers as well in a separate case on the basis of the evidence that he's seen and his interpretation of it in the public prosecutor's investigation, the Prisma investigation. So we may yet get to another sporting trial, and it's unclear at the moment as to whether that would one of the consequences of that could be more points deductions. So we're awaiting clarity on that. But that is, again, I wrote in an article on Monday morning that, on the one hand, it could get better for Juventus in that in 2 months' time, the 15-point penalty could get annulled. They've got some of their best players coming back at the moment. Pogba's in full training for the first time in God knows how long. Vlahovic is as well. Chiesa's back. On the pitch, things could start going better, but simultaneously, it could start going worse. If this separate sporting investigation is open and has consequences, and likewise, we've got this criminal case pending in the end of March.
Fabio Paratici, one of the Juventus officials to have received a ban, former chief football officer at Juventus, now managing director of football at Spurs, which is where Tim now comes in. So he hasn't said anything yet, has he? But what have Tottenham said?
Also nothing at this stage. And, from the off, it's very important to state that there's no suggestion of wrongdoing here by Paratici at Tottenham. And the investigation was obviously purely into activities at Juventus. He left there in May 2021 and then joined Spurs a month later. So there's a line drawn, between those two. I mean, however, from Tottenham's point of view, this is an awful look for them. For there are more important things than that, but it's an awful look for them to start with, particularly a club in sort of Daniel Levy's mould, which is seen as, cautious and astute and canny, and, no deal and no appointment and no signing is made without very careful, consideration. Only last week there was an example of that when, according to Leandro Trossard's agent, Spurs took several days tickling around before coming up with a derisory 12 million offer, and then Arsenal come in and sign him within 24 hours, at 25 million. A perfect example of how sort of Spurs do their business, really, to the frustration of their fans. So, yeah, they're trying to establish themselves as a global entity, and they've got someone who's banned from Italian football running their recruitment, at this moment in time, as we speak. So not only is it not a good look, but if he remains in post, it's arguably going to hurt their ability to sign players and potentially, attract the next manager. So it's embarrassing that they've got someone banned for 30 months in such an important position in their club. But to hire that person, retrospectively now doesn't look very good, but also to continue to employ him means that they do have questions to answer at the moment. And, we have, of course, put a number of questions to them, including, what due diligence was done before hiring Paratici. Was there an assumption that he'd be cleared? That we've known about this for some time now. Will there be an investigation into his activities at Tottenham, and if he's been doing anything similar at Tottenham? I think that's also a very fair question. And will he now be, suspended or sacked? And they're silent for now, which is completely understandable, because they're obviously still processing this themselves and finding out what it means for them going forward. Because there is a push for him to be banned outside of Italy and not just in Italy. But in the short and the medium term, practically it's not good. I mean, the fact that there's 1 week left of the transfer window, Spurs haven't signed a player yet. They're trying to sign players, and Paratici at the moment is still in charge of doing that. So throughout this investigation, I think it has felt like business as usual at Spurs, and they've been trying to sign players this window, but that surely can't remain the case now. And Spurs have got a decision to make.
We've talked on many podcasts when we've talked about Tottenham at the start of the season in particular about how well he used his knowledge of the Italian market actually to bring players in who've been successful for Tottenham under him and Antonio Conte. The ban from Italian football, I'm assuming, James, means actually working for a club in Italy, not liaising with clubs in Italy to buy players for Tottenham. So
that ban wasn't in place when this time last year he was signing players like Kulusevski and Bentancur from Juventus. At the moment, it's a ban that applies within the remit of the Italian Football Federation. So leagues that ultimately have to go to them in order to register and license. But as Tim alluded to there, in the judgment that was put out by the Court of Appeal, they have petitioned that UEFA and FIFA also extend the ban to their jurisdiction. So I think in addition to putting questions to Tottenham, we put questions to UEFA and FIFA as to what are the next steps in that. So yeah, I mean, that is a potential problem for Tottenham when it comes to their ability to operate where he's still in place. And of course, then we've got this criminal case coming up we've got a preliminary hearing coming up at the end of March, which is very serious. Obviously goes beyond what you can do within the game. So in that sense, it will be very interesting to see what action they take. Obviously Paratici is innocent until proven guilty. That's the presumption. And yeah, so we're still kind of looking into that and awaiting clarity on it.